I've always approached sales and marketing like an educational endeavor rather than an endeavor to make more dollars. And I think we could find success as a profession by focusing our efforts on educating and helping people understand what we're doing. And then the dollars kind of come as a result of that.
Welcome to another episode of the Orthopreneurs Podcast. Today, we are lucky to have somebody who I call a friend, somebody who's a mentor of mine, somebody who I've learned a huge amount from, Dr. Jamie Reynolds. Welcome, Jamie.
Hey, thanks for having me, Glenn. It's great to be here.
My absolute pleasure. And so I'm going to change my cadence to match Jamie's because there's no way on the planet Jamie's going to match my cadence. So for those of you who are unaware, Jamie Reynolds wears many hats, not only a clinical orthodontist, but in a capacity with other companies that I'll let him talk about himself. But let's start here, Jamie, if you don't mind. Tell everybody a little bit about what made you become an orthodontist and sort of the short story of how you ended up where you are right now.
So I went to college to be an athletic trainer. So my freshman and sophomore year, I worked for the hockey and football teams, taping ankles at University of Michigan. I realized it wasn't all it cracked up to be. And I got a call from a family friend that summer because I was thinking about going to medical school to do orthopedic surgery. And he says, you should not do that. You should be a dentist and go to dental school, and you should be an orthodontist. And he was a dentist at the time, and he explained to me, what orthodontics is all about. And I never thought about being an orthodontist whatsoever, but the job description sounded pretty good. So then I started studying for the DAT because that one happened to be before the MCAT, and I figured I would do the MCAT next. And, fast forward 30 years, and here I am. As an orthodontist, as I was going through school, I got a call from a guy named Larry Spillane, who had a practice locally, and he was asking some local sales reps on who might be a good fit for the practice. I was doing the same thing. Each of us heard each other's names, and I graduated from ortho school on Friday night, and Monday morning I was working for Larry. That was in 2002. So,
and then Larry still practices, or he's retired?
Yeah, so Larry, we were Spillane Orthodontics for a while, and then a few years in, I became partner. We were Spillane and Reynolds Orthodontics for a while, and then he retired at the tail end of COVID. And so now we're Reynolds Orthodontics. We worked together for about 18 years. We were one location to start. We're 4 locations now, and have sort of, had a sort of a windy road to go from 1 to 4 through a couple of recessions. But that's where we're at today.
Very cool. And for those who don't know Jamie, he's a superstar. He's a humble guy. I think there was some volleyball along the way, right?
Yeah. So after I stopped being an athletic trainer, I had a friend. I joined a fraternity with my extra time. It took a lot of time to do that. And then one of the guys in the fraternity wanted to try out for the volleyball team. They had open tryouts, and he talked me into going with them. And I'm somehow made the team. I wasn't very good, but I used to be able to jump, which is something that I can tell you does not continue with age.
So true.
And the pounds that come along with it. But, I wasn't very good. And they normally have 17 people on the team. They picked me as the 18th as kind of a project. So if you ever see my email or whatever, that's where the 18 comes from. It's sort of motivating for me that they took me as sort of a project player on accident. And so that was, sort of motivating for me to keep working hard.
Very cool. And the good news for you is it was a small school, right? Southwest Arkansas Junior
right.
College, right?
Yeah. So it was University of Michigan. There are only a handful of varsity volleyball teams, to be clear, in college for men because of Title IX. They limit the scholarships for men, but because there's only a handful, maybe 15, all of college has a very robust men's league. You just don't get a scholarship for it. So you play Arizona State, California teams, Florida teams all over the place. They have defined leagues and championships and stuff. So it was a lot of fun.
Very cool, man. It's a great chapter in your life.
Yeah.
And it's not just the weight, it's the knees. My knees, if I jump, man, it just hurts.
It does. Yeah. Everything hurts more than it used to, for sure.
Everything hurts a lot more. And it's funny because, my partner, Doug, he's 38 years old or so, and he just doesn't get it yet. And I'm like, dude, don't be doing that because what you're doing right now is going to hurt you when you're in your 50s. But hey.
You're getting old when you wake up in the morning and you get out of bed and your feet hurt,
Yeah.
Like sometimes it takes me a minute before my feet feel normal in the morning
That's
when I wake up,
I always joke to people that what happened to me when I hit my 50s was that I go to bed feeling great and I wake up with an injury.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Like I go to bed feeling perfect. And I mean, like you, we work out regularly, right? We take care of ourselves, but I go to bed feeling great and I wake up like I can't move my elbow. I'm like, what the heck happened? Like, and I'm convinced my wife is beating me.
Yeah. And there's not a great story that happens that leads to that, right? It's just you fall asleep and wake up.
Yeah. Why are you wearing a cast? Sleep.
Yeah.
But going back to your ortho story. So you have 4 practices now.
Yep.
Locations, and you have 4 going on 5 doctors working there.
Yep.
Just because it's a conversation that a lot of people would love to learn more about, when you looked for an associate, is the process different today than it was, say, when you looked for the first person to join you? And if so, what have you learned along the way?
That's a great question. So we had, we've got 4 great docs working for us now. And we had 3, before them. The first one that was an associate with me was, Andrea Dopp, and she came on when we had 2 practices. And that was a bit different because, we would work together every single day, and, a lot of the, things that we were asking her to do, there was always somebody there to kind of help her out. And then as the practice has grown, the doctors that come in get a bit more autonomy, which at the beginning is a little more challenging. And I think it's a little more fulfilling as they go on. Each of the doctors that I've worked with has been different, so we've had some that are guys, some that are girls, and there's no label based on gender that you can put on them. Like they're just all very different regardless. And they all have different goals and different things that sort of make them excited about coming to work. And so I think spending the time getting to know the person and their goals is the most important thing. And then what their expectations are, which areas that they'd like some mentorship in, which areas that, they kind of have got it. Many of them that evolves over time. So, I don't know how you are, Glenn, but I thought I had a lot more than I actually had when I started working. Yeah. So my perception myself as a doctor and a leader when I started is a lot higher then than my perception of what I was back then. Right. We kind of know it all at the beginning. Yeah, exactly.
You didn't know.
So, so I think just getting to know each other and having an open line of communication along the way. And then everybody, I don't know that there's a great predictor on how people are going to evolve once they kind of start seeing live bullets. Practice is busy. You see so much stuff in the first 18 to 24 months of your career that you never really could have perceived that you would, being there to support them as they go through decision fatigue and, all those things that we've been through at the beginning. I mean, I think communication and support are probably the most important things.
Right. So when you bring in new associates into the business, is it designed around the idea that, hey, you're coming to us as a qualified orthodontist clinically, you know what you're doing, but here are the systems that we follow, and here's how you're going to practice. If you're used to bending a lot of wire, well, we reposition. Or if you're used to repositioning, we bend a lot of wire. This is our elastics protocol. Here's when, how, here's how we bond. Or are you more along the lines of, yeah, you're a qualified orthodontist, just tell us what you need to do. Let's, you treat patients and let's go.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that answer is more defined by the identity of your practice than anything that I might say about how we do it. So we're a Damon practice, and we've spent, 20 years, in the community is making that a differentiator for us. And I personally believe in the value of self-ligation. I do speak on behalf of Ormco sometimes, so take that for what it's worth. But, there won't be a time in my career unless something dramatically changes where I'm not using a passive self-ligating bracket. I just think it's a better mousetrap. So I let them know when they come in, hey, this is the bracket that we're using, and we use aligners. They're free to pick which aligner choice they have. And currently we have Invisalign and Spark in the practice. But if they come to us, we're not going to be sort of putting everybody in twin and taking out 4 buys on half of our patients. That's just not our identity. So I make that clear ahead of time.
Right.
From there, I say, I want you to evolve and do your own thing as a doc. But my advice to you would be that we're a big practice who's been doing things. We've got 50 team members and we've been doing things a certain way for a long time. So we're kind of like a river that has a current to it.
Right.
So rather than kind of swim against the current at the beginning, just drop in, learn what we're doing for a while, try to do it our way. And then once you kind of understand the landscape a little bit more than on your first day, let's talk about how you can do things differently or improve things, and we can work together and make the practice better. So that's how we do it. But that certainly isn't a right way for every practice.
Right on. That's fair. And while we're on the conversation of practices, let's talk a little bit about one of the hats you wear. What is I know you're a founder of OrthoFi, correct? Would that be the proper term? How would I refer to you these days?
Yeah. So myself, Jeff Kozlowski, and Dave Turnen are officially the co-founders of OrthoFi. Dave's the CEO, and then I think Jeff probably needs no introduction. So the three of us had the bad idea to try to. We were doing insignia, a lot of that at the time. Treatment times are coming down. We'd just taken the Orthodontics course, and we were thinking that was going to be a little bit more pervasive in orthodontics than it's turned out to be. And we were wondering, with the shrinking treatment times, how does the financing work out? And we didn't have a great answer for that. We initially thought we were going to compete with Care Credit, which was a horrible idea. And we had no idea that you need, $1 billion+ in order to run that kind of financing model, which, we've learned a lot of things the hard way. But anyway, kick the can down the road. It's evolved into something that I know a lot of people, including me, are really proud of. I'd like to look back and think that we've pushed the envelope with how to structure financing and how to build an ethical and scalable sales process so that orthodontic patients wind up being treated by orthodontists. And we can become better at bringing patients into the spot where they're going to get the best care with all the other options that they're presented with today. And so, I hope when we're done, we can feel like we've helped a lot of people achieve that.
Yeah, I think you've done a great job. And in interest of full disclosure, I've been an outspoken advocate for OrthoFi, both before and after I've had any financial interest in the company. I started as a simple customer, though there is no such thing as just a simple customer. But I've loved the product. I think it's made a huge difference in our practices. The funny thing about OrthoFi that I think is arguably the most misunderstood part of it is that you mention the word OrthoFi, and what's the first thing people say? Slider, right?
Right.
Everybody thinks that the slider is the number one thing, but as a product, it's really from the very beginning of the patient acquisition process through the time of follow-up, it's been a really valuable tool for me and my team. And this interview isn't meant to be an advertisement for OrthoFi, but since you're talking about it, I just felt like I had to throw my 2 cents in there, because if there's a product I appreciate or like, I'm always going to be an advocate. And as like I said, I have spoken on behalf. So as you said best, take that for what it's worth.
I appreciate it. The slider was a cocktail napkin invention of Jet Pascal and Dave Turner and myself at the Damon Forum at a cocktail meeting one time. And Dave was getting back on the plane to fly back to Denver. And by the time the, evening's festivities were over, he had already sent us back a digital mock-up that he worked up on the plane on the way back. And at the beginning, we thought that tool was sort of the revolutionary tool. And I think that there are a lot of things that we've learned, and the slider is certainly a valuable sales tool. But the process that's involved in all of it is a lot more important than that individual piece. And a lot of times if you have just that, it winds up living in the drawer. The software needs to be sort of continuous from the beginning to the end in order for it to be effectively adopted by the team and not be a pain in the butt. And that change management and continuous process is, I think, the more important thing that we've learned over time.
Very cool. What's interesting to me, just taking a sort of a sidetrack for a moment, is that I'm the biggest advocate out there of orthodontists embracing their inner business self, right? That they're not just orthodontics, they're not just clinical orthodontists, which may have been great 40 years ago to say I'm an amazing orthodontist and I'll grow my practice because of it. But in today's day and age, that's sort of like the prerequisite, right? If you ever listen to, oh gosh, I always hate when I draw a blank in the middle of an interview, but Jocko Willink from the former Navy SEAL, who always talks. If you've ever listened to him talk, he'll say, there are some great athletes who never made it through BUDS, right? The underwater demolition part, right? Which is all the heavy lifting. He said it dropped a water polo player from there, a gymnast, an Olympic gymnast didn't make it. And, just being a great athlete doesn't mean you're going to succeed at SEAL. But he did say that's a starting point, right? Like you need to be a great athlete to be able to be a SEAL. And I think the same thing sort of holds true for orthodontics. If you want to be a successful orthodontist in today's day and age, I think being a good orthodontist is an essential part of it, right? I think, sure, there are exceptions of people who are terrible orthodontists who just don't care about their patients and make huge sums of money. But I'm proud to say that the overwhelming majority of orthodontists I know really are committed to their craft and are doing the best they can.
It's fine to see yourself as a clinical orthodontist and behave as such, and only that. But that's, to the extent that your, business success will come along as if that's how you position yourself. There are some people who, what they do is clinical orthodontics, and that's great. Others of us are clinical orthodontists and operate a business or, work inside of a business in some capacity, and not sort of understanding that there are multiple hats that we wear and trying to be good at all of them versus compartmentalized. And the sad thing is that the only people that understand the difference for what we do and what the rest of everybody else does is us, right?
Right.
So, to diagnose the difference between a marginally treated orthodontic case and a well-treated orthodontic case, our consumers don't understand that, right?
Right.
Part of our job is to help them understand that and see that value. And if we're not good at doing that, then people will get inferior care because we haven't done a good enough job educating them. Yeah. So I've always approached sales and marketing like an educational endeavor rather than an endeavor to make more dollars. And I think we could find success as a profession by focusing our efforts on educating and helping people understand what we're doing. And then the dollars kind of come as a result of that.
Yeah, I think it's well stated. And, the interesting part is if you go on social media today, right? You got guys and gals who love to dance. Good for them. Right?
I'm not one of them.
I'm not one of them either. I saw a great post not too long ago by Grant Collins. They had 3 out of 4 orthodontists can dance, and he showed or 3 out of 4 dentists, and he showed 3 docs who are well known dancers.
Doug's one of them, probably.
And then it was him holding a feather, like a rhythmic gymnast, just swinging around like I'm the 4th.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is just I so associated with that so truly because. Again, people will dance great. If you think that's going to grow your practice, go for it. I don't think it does. I think it draws interest. Some people, will tell jokes, which is great. Some people will do TikTok trends, which is great. But if you watch someone who I really like, Ashley Kissling, right? If you watch her out of Southern California, and hopefully she'll be speaking at next year's summit in 2023, she took her practice from 0 to 6 figures in less than a year, a startup. Right? In a very competitive environment. And she focused almost entirely on education. She did educational videos on TikTok, which is right now $1 for $1 is probably your best place to get new business. She was doing educational videos. And that's where I've chosen to put myself is sure, you guys can go dance all you want. You can tell all the jokes you want. And that's great. If it's truly growing your practice, if you can quantify that, good for you. Keep going. You dance your butt off. But for me, it's going to be all about education, just like you said, because great education, even if I'm educating somebody in California who's never going to come to me as a new patient, there's going to be a number of people in my community who are going to learn from that post. And even if they don't come see me, at least they're making a better choice when they go to see somebody.
I agree. I think, I love Grant. And, if anyone hasn't met Grant, he's one of the more humble and sort of introverted people you ever meet, which is not what you would expect from his TikTok presence. Courtney, Dr. Courtney in New York, is another one that is has a hilarious and amazing TikTok feed. But, I'm not that person. I never will be that person. If I try to be that person, I would wind up looking stupid rather than being famous TikTok person. So I think understanding what we are, and if you've got a big personality, you can go out and, Doug's TikTok personality is a little bit different than yours, right? And he's great, right? But I couldn't do that. And so I think at least if you're wondering where a good place to start would be as you get into social media or try to do some marketing and advertising, starting with education is a good foundational place. And then you can use that to kind of find your way. And if you wind up being like me, which is that's as far as you get, then great. If it winds up being a little bit more personality than that, great. But I would say make it your own rather than trying to be, somebody like Grant, who there's only one of.
Yeah. I mean, as far as, social media, I didn't mean to dive into this with you, but it's kind of a fun topic. What I always just say is like, I love watching people on social media, particularly in our industry. And I always put it out like this. There's a difference between being laughed with and being laughed at. And as long as somebody looks professional in what they're doing, if you're the butt of the joke, then I'm against it. Right. And you see enough people out there who act, excuse the expression, I'll use the word horse's ass. Like, if you're doing a trend and you're twerking to sell ortho or sell yourself, that's a different story than somebody who's just fun. And like Doug Shaw, my partner, you should go check out his Shaw Orthodontics feed. He does it perfectly because anybody who knows Doug knows two things about Doug. He's an entertainer and he will never utter a curse word. He will never curse. He will never be morally deprived. He's just depraved. He's an amazing human being. And when you I'm laughing thinking about some of his posts on TikTok or Instagram because they're so genuinely who Doug is, and it's not a show. It's just an extension of who he is.
Exactly.
And so kudos to everybody out there who are making people laugh, who are educating people, having fun. You've got to find the thing that speaks to you the most. But I do think there is a difference at the end of the day between becoming an expert and becoming an attraction. Right? If you're an expert because you're always giving information, you're always giving knowledge, the equivalent to what was spoken about at Summit last year on stage about writing a book, right? If you become, influencer marketing by becoming an expert, that's going to draw people to you in a very different way than being known as a Charlie D'Amelio kind, who's not known for her impressive genius. She's known for her dancing ability, right? She's got a huge amount of followers, but what does that really mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody will watch Cole Johnson do a music video and be like, "Wow, I wish I could do that."
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean you should try.
Don't.
Do
not try this at home, people.
Many people, unfortunately, have tried, and I don't think it's worked out very well. So, I think stay in your lane and focus on education. It's at least good advice for the beginners, and then
for sure,
find your own way.
It's like Hitch. Stay in your lane.
Yeah.
This is your happy place. And then, you want to venture out a little bit, it might be okay. But let's go into the third hat you wear because you run 4 practices. You're co-founder of OrthoFi, which we talked about. Let's go into the third hat you wear, which relates to OSOs, DSOs, right? So do you want to give people a little bit of background about your role in that space?
My journey's been super windy. From the beginning, I didn't know I was going to be an orthodontist one day. In fact, when I asked my father for some advice, he was in business, worked for the phone company, and he told me you can do anything but go into business. Which funny. I think has evolved to be somewhat ironic anymore, what I spend a lot of my time doing. But so anyway. As OrthoFi was going along, we got some investors from a couple of different private equity companies. When we had boards and we had some pretty high-powered business people sitting on the boards, and you wind up learning a lot of stuff about business that I never thought I would know. And then as OrthoFi started to grow some, it started to attract interest from some larger investors. And they had done a healthcare meeting in San Francisco that happens every year, and it went well, and a lot of investors were calling them, but half of them were calling to ask about OrthoFi as an investment, and the other half, Smile Doctors, was there, and they had just kind of had their first coming out party, and at the time they were the fastest growing DSO ever, right? So a lot of those investors were like, "Wow, who can we, kind of get to be the next Smile Doctors?" And so they were calling Dave, the CEO of OrthoFi, asking, if they knew anybody, you guys probably know who we could be calling. And so he would hand the phone calls off to Kaz and I, and we wound up talking to a lot of these investors. It was mostly curiosity at the beginning, just trying to understand the landscape and what was happening. But we talked to enough people and listened to guys like Chris Benson, who's, advised for some time now, is that 50% of the profession is going to be consolidated over the next 10 years. And we became convinced that consolidation was going to happen. And then it was like, do we participate or do we just kind of sit on the sideline and wait? And so we said, if we're going to participate, we have a particular thesis that we'd like to test. We started telling that to the investors that would call us, and they all laughed at us and told me we were, barking up the wrong tree. And then finally, we met an investor group kind of at the 11th hour that Chris Benson introduced us to, that kind of had the same thesis as us and was trying to find some people to do that with them. And it wasn't an easy decision because, as somebody that's part of an OSO at this point, like, there's a lot of arrows that come that way. And it's not exactly the way that I would have drawn up the fairy tale of orthodontics if I was going to pen it back from my early days. But
right.
It is what it is at this point. And so, our hope is that, groups like yours and ours can help to make it great for the profession, regardless of what some people happen to think about it. So that's what our mission has been.
Yeah. And for those out there who didn't hear him say it, the name of the group is?
Orthodontic Partners. Yeah.
There you go. I figured we'd at least get the name in there at some point. and so there's, truthfully, Jamie and I could sit here and talk without exaggeration, probably 3 to 5 hours on a lecture if we wanted to, about what does private equity really mean? How does it function in the space? What are all the ramifications, both pro and con, if there are, related to this consolidation? What should you need to know? What is the lifespan of a particular company in private equity? I mean, there's so many things to talk about. But the funniest part about it is the overwhelming majority of orthodontists, I don't know if you'd agree with this, because I think in terms of the adoption curve, we're still very early in this. If you look at the numbers of orthodontists who've consolidated versus the number of orthodontists practicing in the United States, we're still very early in this process. And yet, it seems to me the most vocal, outspoken opponents of the process actually are the least knowledgeable on the process, right? They don't quite understand. They hear company consolidation and automatically knee-jerk is, this is bad, right? This is going to be bad for patient care. This is going to be bad for orthodontists. This is going to be bad for the profession of orthodontics. You hear it from everybody from every angle. And I strongly disagree with it on many levels, though I can understand where their initial, like you said, where their thesis comes from. Mm-hmm. But like some of these books out there that write on certain topics that are quasi-scientific, they start off with a piece of fact and then make a right turn into crazy land. I often think that these discussions and arguments are based a lot on emotion and not real knowledge. If I were to ask you, well, I'm not going to ask hypotheticals. I'll ask it outright. You and Jeff Kozlowski are not just really smart business people, but you're looked up to as really good clinicians. Has the quality of care in your practice decreased in any way, shape, or form by joining Orthodontic Partners?
Yeah. So just to answer your sort of previous commentary there, I think it's important for people to remember that volume does not always equivalent to accuracy or truthfulness. You know what I mean? And there are loud people on both sides of the coin that, I think the important thing is to find your own information and learn just like anything else. From my perspective, our practice hasn't changed at all clinically from joining or founding an OSO, nor would I say that any of the practices that are part of Orthodontic Partners, I can't speak to your group or anybody else's, but, our thesis from the beginning is to partner with great doctors and try to continue to enhance the clinical care that happens to the patients who interact with us. And that doesn't happen by our CEO telling them what bracket to buy. You know what I mean? And so we partner with people on purpose because of their conviction in what they do, rather than, just trying to buy a 50-cent Chinese bracket and bring the bottom line down. make money. We think that, again, part of me and my philosophy with all the stuff we do is that I think financial returns, and maybe not when you invest in the market, but when you invest in your own business, is more of a consequence than a goal. So you obviously don't want to be stupid in how you run your P&L, and you want to have good business processes and things that pay attention to profitability. But I think the overwhelming goal should be to deliver excellent value for your customer, and then the financial stuff kind of take care of itself through growth, more of a top line growth oriented vision, and that's the way I approach all of it. And I think providing excellent clinical care, best in class, best in market clinical care is part of that. You have to do it, and if orthodontists don't, whether you're part of any individual group or private practice or whatever, but we all should be banding together as a whole to make sure that we remain the gold standard of clinical care. And if we don't do that, I think then some of these scare tactics that other people are complaining about DSOs about may actually come true, but it's up to us to protect it, which is, I think it's different. We have the control. None of us, we're the ones putting brackets on the teeth. We're the ones making treatment plans. And if it needs to stay that way, in my opinion.
I agree. And it's well said. Like you said best, just because you're loud doesn't mean you're right.
Yeah.
And I've always been, and you've always been, a huge advocate of saying, it's funny, the moment I say the word OSO, and like yourself, I try to be a resource, just like we talked about for our patients, right? Education. I won't do a DSO OSO dance, to get people excited, or no, I tell jokes.
Music video.
A music video. We'll do a Cole Johnson music video on OSOs, right? But I've always tried to be a resource. And like I said to you before we went on here, I've had legitimately, and not exaggerating, 250 maybe doctors at some point ask me at least one question about OSOs or DSOs. The overwhelming majority of them, I'm not directing to Smile Doctors, of which we're a part. They might be in a state that Smile Doctors doesn't operate. They might not be ready to join an OSO. There's a million reasons why you might not even be right for this model, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But again, as a resource, and it will be borne out by all the people who are listening to this who know that I've told them, go to, contact Ortho Partners, or contact Chorus, or contact My Orthos, or contact Southern Ortho Partners, or contact any number of companies that might be better fits for them, or be perfect fits for them. I've always been out there, and I'm sorry if I've omitted names, but it's funny because the vast majority of the loud voices don't want the education. It's so incredibly typical that I could put a post out there and go, hey, if you don't know anything about OSOs, but you're interested, just DM me and I'll tell you, the basics, or I have a white paper. And instantaneously, someone will go out there and post instantly, OSOs are bad, or, what's going to happen when X happens? Or, how do you handle this? And I'm like, that's not what this post is about. It's like, it's just like, hey, people, chill, just relax, take a deep breath and recognize that nobody's forcing their will on anybody. And to date, I'm just saying to date, as of the recording of this in August of 2022, I am yet to meet anybody who's a part of any OSO. I'm not throwing DSOs I'm putting into a different category with lots of general dentists, and it may or may not be true, but I'm yet to meet anybody who joined any OSO who was a crappy clinician who was in it just for the money, who wanted to treat people just for the money. I haven't met them yet.
Just like anything else, I think that's probably out there, right? And, the OSOs that I'm familiar with try to, make sure there's a partnership mentality as they join. But I mean, the world isn't a perfect place. I think the ones that I'm familiar with have a good mission and they're trying to stick to it. Yeah. I've gotten to know Dwight Damon over the years, and he's a huge mentor of mine. And not to complain or to compare directly what Dwight did to what OSOs are doing, but Dwight's message over the years was become an incredible clinical orthodontist and try not to take out teeth. Right? That's basically what his message is. And the guy, if you've ever seen him speak, did beautiful work. I mean, at least from my perspective, amazing clinician. That's why I started using, because I wanted to be able to treat like him, and I couldn't. And he's taken so many arrows over the years, or Dwight this and Dwight that, but he's just trying to get people to do better work and to try to avoid taking teeth out, which he thinks is typically, not always, but typically unnecessary. From a consolidation standpoint, although it's not the same as comparing it to Dwight, it is kind of what it is. And so, you can complain about it, you can stay out of it and continue to do your own thing. And I think private practice orthodontics is alive and well and will continue to be ad infinitum. A great small business owner will continue to be successful in their neighborhood. It's just getting harder. It's a lot harder to compete now because there's more competitors entering the area that are sophisticated. And it's getting more expensive to compete. So it's not just as easy as hanging your shingle and then, build it and people will come.
Right.
And so, for, a lot of people that's going to put them in a group type practice, wherever that is. And it just is, it can be good. It cannot be good. A lot of it is what we decide to make of it. And we've thrown our hats in the ring to try to make it better. I'll tell you in 5 or 10 years, whether we're successful at that or whether it was a good idea, but that's what we're trying to do. And, I appreciate, a lot of what you do, Glenn, is a lot of similar to what Dwight is, take a lot of arrows for the rest of us for putting ideas out there that might seem controversial to some, but that's the way that progress happens. Now, whether you believe OSOs or OrthoFi or passive self-ligation or whatever is progress, progress happens by people who are challenging the status quo and who invariably get a bunch of crap for it. Which I know that you do. So, I appreciate all that you do to help all of us try to get better. I know that's your motivation.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And I got to tell you, I don't even listen to the crap I get. I mean, I do if it's really good crap, I get. Like if somebody says, there's the old saying, what you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. Mm. And, there are people out there who are so incredibly anti everything, right? It could be that person who's older, retired. It could be somebody fresh out of school who's jaded on something, but they're so anti this or anti that every comment they make is, if it's not the way they did it, then it has to be bad. I didn't advertise. Why are you advertising? I didn't join an OSO. Why are you joining an OSO? They must be bad. They must be terrible. I use twin. You're using self-ligating. I got great finishes with my twin. If it's not the way I did it, then it can't be good. And that's just a sign of a closed mind to me. And to me, that's honestly, if you ask me, what's my definition of hell? My definition of hell is the inability to change. The inability to grow, the inability to morph, the inability to learn and adapt and get better. If you say, Glenn, I got to put you at this desk, you're going to do this job every day, never grow, never get bigger, never learn, never be able to innovate like a governmental agency is work that has to get done, I'd kill myself. There's no way I could ever do that. And so I'm very passionate about the things that I've jumped into education on. And there have been some things out there, but the good news is if it's good crap, meaning if somebody says, hey, Glenn, I talked to blank company and I got to tell you, here's the experience I had. Great. Now you and I have a private discussion about what may have gone on. Let's debrief. Let me learn from it. Let me go ask questions about it. And that's good because I'm evolving. I'm learning more. And I think, unfortunately, this becomes a bit like color war, not for you or for me or for a lot of other people who we know, where being an OSO is part of who we are, but it doesn't define who we are because we want a rising tide to lift all ships, right? Because and again, sorry for the long sort of monologue here, but the part that I think people forget is that Jamie Reynolds and Glenn Krieger are friends, as is, any number of people I could throw out there from different groups, because again, I'm rooting for Orthodontic Partners in the same way you're rooting for Smile Doctors, and the same way I'm rooting for every other company out there, because think about the catastrophic effect it would have on orthodontics and the whole world in general if any one of these failed, right? All of a sudden, if something terrible happened or they changed their model horribly to where care no longer matters, all of a sudden we all get grouped together as we are right now, and it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little more altruistic because I think if someone starts chasing the bottom line dollars, then the ones that are doing things the right way will eventually win. And I mean, you see that with Smile Direct Club. Not that I'm suggesting that they're doing anything, but I think a lot of us would agree that their business model is somewhat incomplete from what we would do. Right. Or that it might fall into the category of limited treatment. And I don't think that their stock prices had the runaway success that many people would have feared. from the beginning, from an ortho side. I think change is hard for all of us. If you're resistant to change, sometimes you tend to, have, again, one of the louder volumes. I would say for your sake and for your customers and patients' sake, make sure that the resistance that you're feeling and maybe wanting to sort of lean towards is justified,
Right.
Because there are certain things that you don't want to change. You don't want to give up, your integrity of what you do, You don't want to stop being open to new ideas, but you probably do need to continue to change and evolve in order to be giving the quality of treatment that you're telling yourself that you are. Evolution is part of it. It doesn't mean it's different. One of the guys in our group, his name is Tim Truelove, who's, the guy that writes the test for the ABO, right? So he's in charge of quality control. And I've been to his practice. I've seen his cases, and we practice very differently, and he's what some people would maybe consider to be old school, the way he practices mechanics and stuff. But I've been in his office, and his treatment is beautiful. His patients are treated extraordinarily well. I don't think I'm good enough at what I do to replicate doing what he does, but I make what works for me work well. And, I think focusing on delivering an excellent result, whichever modality gets you there, and helping each other is far more important than sort of passing judgment on a lot of the things that people are doing, especially when some of it is just resistance to change and not really, inclusive of the quality that might be improving or not.
No, it's really well said. And again, I think at the end of the day, OSOs are not going away. And I think the biggest misnomer on the whole picture that I'll end this part with for myself is when we come out of ortho residency, many of us went to work in DSOs, right? But there's different kinds of companies. Like I worked in companies where I was the only orthodontist in the whole organization. They had a gazillion dental patients, and I would go into an office once a week or once a month, and they'd rotate me around their places, and the instruments were broken, and there was never enough brackets, and the glue had an expiration date from 6 months earlier, or the adhesive, and different assistants treated every single time because they weren't there anymore. And there were general dental assistants being trained as ortho assistants, but never really amazing assistants. And it was crystal clear that orthodontics was a very big profit model, and really no forethought was given to any systems or policies or ability to really focus on exceptional patient care. And we all tried our best. Anybody out there who's delivered that kind of model or been in that model knows what I'm talking about. We've all done our best. We have our battle scars from attempting, and eventually many of us, like myself, move on from it. And that's the way it is. And I think people seem to think that the OSO model is like that, right? Like, there has to be some sort of disregard for the care in order to be able to make money. And at the end of the day, even Smile Doctors, who originally was very different years ago, everybody came to the realization that by buying Reynolds Orthodontics to partner with them as part of our OSO, we need to let Jamie Reynolds be Jamie Reynolds, because that's what made him successful. And that's what made us want to buy Reynolds Orthodontics or partner with Reynolds Orthodontics. And that's the key takeaway from this, in my opinion, is that, and I tell this to everybody, is that if you've got a great culture, if you're a good person, if you do good ortho, if you've got a good bottom line, you're the kind of partner I'd like to be a partner with. If you don't do good ortho, or, you're not a good person, or your culture is terrible, I don't want you as a part of my group. I don't want to partner with you, and you probably don't want to partner. So it's just important to remember that the overwhelming majority of people I've met, going back to my original comment, are good people who are trying to do good ortho, because nobody wants to be the partner to the person who isn't, right?
Yeah. And I think, for me, the message, I think, just, OSO or not OSO, is that focusing on making the practice that you work in, whether you own it or you don't, the best place for your customers to come is what we should be doing as a profession, and, we could go around to the different group ones and we can judge about what's going on in theirs. Some may be better than we might hypothesize. Some may be a little worse, depending on who's managing or what particular practice it is. I know you have been too, Glenn, and I've been in a lot of different private practices. I've been in practices where the same case has multiple different styles of brackets on because they're cleaning out the bracket drawer. People that are in treatment, one office I looked at has a 72-month payment plan. And once you start in phase 1, then you just get a 72-month payment plan and you go all the way through. And any number of things in between with any number of different, what I would consider to be highly questionable practices in there. And the reality is a lot of us don't have a lot of oversight. And so, that lack of oversight over a long period of time has allowed us to have, in many cases, an exaggerated self-perception of what we're providing for our people. But we've still been paid very well for it. I call it economic confirmation bias, right? So because we've made a lot of money, it means that what we were doing is right. And that's really dangerous for our profession, So regardless of, what group you're in or not, or whether you own it or not, like not letting the dollars that we make dictate what our truth, is really important. And, I think it's up to us to continue to manage that. And the fact that we have let that get the better of us, the economic confirmation bias, is probably the reason why we have as many competitors as we do, because our customers are looking for something different. So regardless of what model you're in, I would suggest, all of us need to continue to be doing the right thing as best as we can and embracing change, not resisting it, regardless of what form that comes in.
Wow. I can't top that. That's like where we need to end. That was beautiful, Jamie. Because it's spoken from the heart, and I know you live it. And Jamie Reynolds for president. Let it be heard here first.
Right.
I'd vote for you, Jamie. You could run my company, my country anytime. But seriously, I always love the time I have with you. You always get me thinking in another direction. And you've been a huge guiding light for me in my career so far.
Likewise.
And well, thank you. Looking forward to seeing you sometime, hopefully soon at some point.
I will see you in Orthopreneurs at the very least.
Yeah, and this may air after that. So hopefully I'll see you in the next one.
Well, great seeing you then, yeah.
It was great seeing you.
Yeah.
It was great seeing you, Jamie. It was awesome. But seriously, thank you for being a part of the podcast today. Hopefully people will get a lot out of this and just keep on doing what you're doing, man. You're doing great stuff for the profession on so many levels. And I can't wait to find out what the next big thing is. Because I know you have so much free time on your hands. You're going to come up with something else.
So when we're done, I'll send you a link to this thing we're working on called Project Mariposa. And you can let me know what you think. I'd really like to hear what you have to say. So it's been an honor. Thanks you for having me on.
That's my pleasure. And I love butterflies. So it's all good. So, hey, everybody, thank you for tuning in on this one. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Jamie. And just wishing you all an amazing day. Take care.